Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 Welcome to Bonn Park. I'm Sara Geidlinger.
And I'm Marshall Ward.
Today we have Lisa O'Connell. She's a fierce advocate for regional theatre artists, and she is the founding artistic director of Pat the Dog Theatre Creation, a catalyst for new works of theatre and PlaySmelter, Northern Ontario's New Work Theatre Festival.
She is also a two-time recipient of a special jury award from Arts Awards Waterloo and has delivered the closing keynote address at the Canadian Association of Theatre Researchers Conference.
Launching throughout Kitchener and Waterloo in March 2020, Femme Folks Fest is a new month-long festival dedicated to and in celebration of women identified and presenting. Programming will include live performance in theatre, dance, first look backstage performance, spoken word, installations, community conversation cafes on issues pertaining to women, and a conference on digital story gaming creation for women and non-binary folk. Children's and teen programming will also occur during March break. There will also be professional development masterclasses for artists. Activity will occur in 7 venues across Waterloo region. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I haven't talked to Lisa in a long time, and I'm looking forward to catching up with her.
Yeah, and we also improv a little bit of old-fashioned Saturday Night Live, so let's get to it. Lisa O'Connell, thank you so much for coming. We're excited to have you here.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
It's nice to meet you, but I want to know how you and Marshall met.
You want to start?
Yeah, so I think it was maybe 2008, somewhere around there.
Oh, God, yeah, maybe even longer.
And it was at the Button Factory, which is the
right.
Waterloo Community Arts Center.
That's right.
And which is if you haven't been there, it's kind of spooky and beautiful.
It is,
and
totally.
creaky.
Yeah.
And I think you just showed up one time when it was maybe teaching a life drawing class in the evening.
Yeah, that's right.
And you had just acquired an office space.
The world's smallest office.
Yeah.
Almost a closet. maybe a closet is bigger.
Yeah. You did have windows, though.
Barely, but yeah.
Right, window. And I think maybe we were introduced by Heather Franklin.
That's right.
And we just hit it off from there. And I felt like after one conversation, I felt like I had known you for forever.
I felt the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So somewhere in that timeline, I think.
And I was just starting out, so Pat the Dog is 15 years now.
Yeah, I figured, yeah.
Yeah, and I took the office because it's that very Virginia Woolf thing where you feel that, I had started an organization, didn't know what the heck I was doing really. I had literally started out with a collective of 6, quickly became 15, quickly became 50, all of them in a little tiny briefcase knapsack. And I thought I need to give these people more space, at least metaphysically in my brain, and felt the legitimacy of an office would do well. So
I get it.
Yeah.
I understand why you wanted that office and why that makes sense.
And I needed it out of my house. That was part of it too. Is that it's anytime you're working in the arts, it's that moment when you commit to something outside your space. And I work in theater, so I think about space a lot. And
would you say it's kind of like a visual artist getting a studio?
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. And it's part commitment and part legitimacy, but it's also part you got to get out of your bedroom. It can be like the bad lover. It could be the good lover, but it can be like the bad lover because it's there all the time. And so you don't want to it's when we work in the arts, it's 24/7, but it's not super healthy to do that. So part of it was my intent to say, okay, you can never do 9 to 5, but I can put it here and put it there. And so that's where I went. And those community arts centers, like the Button Factory, are so essential because that's where you go. You don't know where to go. I remember I just went there because it was a beautiful building and I knew it. And I walked in the door and I literally said to the administrator, who was beautiful, Heather Franklin, who's still there, and said, I'm looking for my community. Literally.
That's great.
It really is. And we need those spaces, which more and more the gentrification, they're harder to find, but they're so essential because that instinct for us to create, either from an amateur perspective or professional or whatever it be, those spaces are really important to have.
Yeah, I think about how much Pat the Dog would not have worked as an office space in a sterile space like white walls and a metal desk.
Never. Well, we're the only theater organization in the whole Waterloo region that rents an office. where I, with again my colleagues who do beautiful work, but they're many of them in churches or they're in spaces in sort of a residency. But we, even though it costs me a fair bit of money, like honestly, it would be the equivalent of a full salary for an artist for a year, to rent an office and also rent a micro performance space, and it's literally having that. Having that storefront, having that sign outside, says to the community, this is a space that can be valued, come through our door. We're here. And that's why we do it. Because I remember, it wasn't that long ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do relate to that about space so much. Not so much having the storefront in the community, but I used to work from home full time, and it was a lot of yoga pants and sweatshirts.
Yep, for sure.
And maybe, on day 2 or 3 of editing a big wedding project, my husband saying, "Is that the same outfit from Monday? Because it's like Wednesday now, And you just don't notice.
It's
it's so easy to do because your life is so entwined. Your home life, your family life, and your work life is all just one ball, right?
24/7, yeah.
And leaving the house and having that workspace to actually get to, and then having that mindset on your short commute or long commute to get there can really be putting you in that zone, right?
Yeah.
But I also love what you're saying about creating a face and a space for your business or for your organization, your business, for the community. I do want to know more for our listeners that haven't researched.
Sure, of
What's
course.
Pat the Dog? How did the name originate, and what do you do?
Well, I'm a theater person. So what I do is I work in theater, and I work with people that have the first inspiration of the idea to create a piece of theater. And my official title is I'm a dramaturg, which is a scary German word.
I had to look that up
Yeah,
today.
everybody does. It's like a horrible word. It's a scary German word that basically means I'm like an editor to a novel. I'm really just somebody who's sort of trained and schooled and knows all the different elements, theatrical language, to how to tell a piece to be on stage. And when writers write, but people that write for theater write something that needs to be spoken as actors. And so as opposed to sitting alone and you write your novel or your short story, I worked as a journalist for a while, as you write your column to give to your editor, you're writing something that needs to be spoken by actors that ultimately will require a director. To create a piece of theater can be anywhere from 1 to 10 years. And traditional pieces you'd see that would be on major stages like at Stratford. For the new pieces, Shakespeare's lovely, but dead playwright, the new stuff can take anywhere from 5 to as much as 12 years. Musicals usually take even more because they're more expensive and they require a bigger team and staff. So I started as a playwright. I got involved as a playwright when I was working in journalism, wrote a play. I'll be up front with you. I was all through theater in high school and university. I was the first person to graduate in my family from university. I lacked the courage to go to the arts. I felt I had to get a real job. So
we've all been there.
Yeah, we did. And what ended up happening is that honestly, if you don't honor your voice, what you're supposed to meant to be comes crawling back into your soul and pulls you out when you kind of get into your mid-30s, which is what happened to me. And so I started writing, and I had some success very early, and I had a couple of theaters in Toronto that were interested in my work. And at the time, I was a single mom with 3 kids. All of them were, they were 10, 12, 13, and going back and forth from Toronto was difficult. I was privileged. I had a car, I had some money, but still it wasn't easy. And I started asking myself, well, this is crazy. Why do I have to drive back and forth? Why can't I get the supports for me to develop my work? How come there's no dramaturg here? How come? So I just started studying and I started working, and we got a collective together. And it was really, the idea was just to have a group of people together to be able to create work that we would take to production at either Toronto Fringe or Summer Works, any of those places. But it grew really quickly. At the same time I was starting the idea for Pat the Dog as a collective, there was a beautiful company called Empty Space, which is a really beautiful, important theater company in town. The founding artistic director is Majdi Bhumitar. Pam Patel, who's a glorious, wonderful artistic director, is now the artistic director. And Majdi started a couple of years before I did, as did Isabel Cisterna with Neruda Productions. So we had a couple of things that were happening in town. One of the pieces we worked on was produced by Empty Space. Again, we had a collective of 5, became 12, became 50. Before I knew it, within a period of about a year and a half, when I went to the Button Factory, we had about 100 people that were reaching out to us. And so this thing became a thing. And
it's like you're standing on top of a hill yelling,
absolutely,
where are my people?
Yeah, they came. If you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
But then what are you going to do, right?
Yeah.
So, the idea was to always be a collective and just create pieces of work that we would work with producing theaters. But there weren't enough producing theaters here in town. Anyhow, the long and the short of it, over a period of 15 years, Now we're the largest incubator for theatre in Canada. We were founded in Kitchener-Waterloo. We also have an office in Sudbury, Ontario, working with Northern Ontario playwrights. We have a festival in Northern Ontario called PlaySmelter, which runs every May. We're going to our 8th year, and that festival is for Northern Ontario creators to have their work produced. And starting this March, we're going to launch a festival in Kitchener-Waterloo called Femme Folks Fest, which will be a month-long festival devoted to work by, for, created by women in conversations about women. It'll be the only festival of that breadth 4 weeks in all of Canada. So yeah, and I'll share with you all the way through, it was just one question being another question being another question, and literally being dogged, like the name of the company, to kind of carve out a space for arts in Canada. I was born and raised in Toronto. I love Toronto. But, there's beautiful, beautiful work and voices here in Kitchener-Waterloo. And I got tired of doing that drive back and forth. And I then got really stubborn, probably because I started this in my late 30s. I thought, this is crazy. We should be able to have these supports here. And I found over time people began to agree. So now we're a model for regional creation. We've won awards for it. We're really well known nationally, maybe not as well known even locally, and now we're fully producing, and so it's kind of exciting.
I think about how many arts incubators don't make it, don't
Yeah.
work for whatever reason.
It's hard.
Even ones that have lots of money. I know some that start off with a lot of funding.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's just a year later, it just doesn't gel.
It's grassroots work. I mean, and it's tough work. So you have to work with your community, and our approach has always been bottom up as opposed to top down.
Yeah.
And so, it's like anything. You teach someone how to fish, they'll be able to look after their family. But if you're prescriptive and tell them what to do, you might get a project that's really successful, but it won't progress over time. So I hate to use, it's a boring analogy, but it's literally the seeding and the watering and letting it grow.
It's not. I love that analogy. I don't think that's boring at
It's
all.
really true.
I think it's true.
And it's making mistakes. There's been a lot of risk in it. We're 15 years in, and I would say I still say that we show promise. We've won a lot of awards. We've had people nominated for the Governor General's Award. We've got a number of people that have had major things that are very exciting. But, we're still mostly working with grassroots stories, grassroots creators, and we marry people that maybe are doing their very first play with maybe someone who's been bruised a couple of times and has a PhD in theater. And that mashup, if you will, of these different skills are extraordinarily important towards telling our stories in the community. The last number of years, I'd say the last 5, we've really identified, in this region at least, women's stories, because there just isn't enough work for women. And the studies, the gender equity studies across the country are that men get produced at double the rate that women get produced, despite the fact that most of the graduates, about 60% out of the programs, are women. So, it's just a disconnect. How do you change that? You just do the work. And that's one of the reasons we're platforming the festival,
And in the vein of the festival, I was reading about your women's room.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure,
I think it's pretty amazing.
Oh, thanks. I mean, it's like, honestly, it's not, I always say it's not rocket science, but it sounds, literally, we got an award from Canada Council a year and a half ago for sector innovation and innovation. So we got an award that says we're incredibly innovative. And our innovative structure is literally, we have a table in the office, the IKEA table that I bought when I was at university and built like 30 years ago, that my children put their, and we put a call out 4 years ago for women in the community to come to the table every 2 weeks for a period of 5 months to gather and tell their stories and just commune and talk. That's all it is. And in the first year, we had a real mashup of, we had some people come from Toronto, one from London, one from Hamilton. We had people that had gone through traditional theatre programs, might have had a master's. We had a woman who was working for the OPP. We had a woman who was a therapist. All different ages, all different nationalities, ethnicities, coming together really just to share their stories. We just started our new women's room, now in our 5th year, just 3 weeks ago. It's facilitated now by our playwright in residence, Deanna Kruger, who's a gorgeous playwright from Guelph. And Deanna was in our women's room 2 years ago.
Oh, that's amazing.
And we worked with her. She'd already been an established playwright, but hasn't been produced yet. And she, through working with us and doing her beautiful work, we were able to get a residency for her from Canada Council and the Ontario Arts Council. So Deanna last year was I think we were the only organization in the history of Waterloo region to have funding from Canada Council for a playwright in residence.
That's great.
Which is Deanna, which is amazing. And the exciting thing about Deanna is that she's a beautiful, local woman from Guelph who is in her early 40s. So she's like a mom, she's like got a story to tell, right? And she is a remarkable storyteller. So she's facilitating a room right now. I assist with her, and we have 9 gorgeous women from the region. We have a couple of people that are new to our country. We have a couple of people who've been here forever. We have different ages, and we just capture and get together we meet again on Thursday, so it's every 2 weeks, and people are just coming with their stories. Some of them have plays, some of them have ideas. We had a gorgeous woman 2 weeks ago that just had an idea for something, and she really doesn't identify as a writer, but she created this beautiful piece of prose that was really poetic. And then we have a director from Pakistan who just moved to the community who's going to put a piece of dance together based on it. So it's that kind of literal magic and conversation and fun. A lot of food. I like to eat.
Always the food.
Yeah, I got a lot of food in the room.
I wanted to get to that. You guys are now actually branching out and teaching other people how to create these rooms. But then you touched on something that sparked with me, because when I am with other creative people, but specifically with creative friends who are women, I feel safe to take bigger swings.
Yeah, you're right.
And I think that's something that will change that that employment gap.
Yeah, I think so too.
And for women getting produced, like you were talking about earlier, when you're in that safe place and you can, I guess that's what I mean. Take those bigger swings and throw those ideas out there. That's when the good stuff happens.
You need your people, and it isn't like, I have a son, I have 3 kids, I have a son, I have beautiful stepsons. I've been married twice. I love men. It isn't anti or against. But the truth is, the reality is, there's a poly economy that has just prevented our stories from going out there, despite the fact and our friends, everyone's interested in everyone else's story. So this platforming of this table was literally an opportunity for those women to get together and feel safe to take those risks. And now we're ready, which is why we're launching this festival, to bring it to the public, because we just don't have enough of those stories. And to encourage other people to take that risk, to have that fun, to talk about what you want to talk about. It's really, really exciting. And I mean, it's the most boring thing in the world, literally having a coffee table and inviting people to come and coffee and talk, but I find it kind of crazy that would be considered incredibly innovative, and yet it is. Like, we got a $100,000 award for being innovative, for me to have people around my IKEA table and talk about their work. And we even got another award from the British Council to work with a group in the north of Scotland, where I went over in October.
Oh, that was just recently.
I went over in October to mentor them on creating their own women's room, which again is just... Isn't it kind of crazy? We still, in this time of high technology, we need that invitation to look each other in the eye and just tell our stories.
It's totally different.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating to me how something can start off so minimal. So I can picture in your door in the office at the Button Factory with a piece of paper that's very minimal, black and white, pat the dog. Pat the dog is all lowercase.
Yeah.
So very kind of unassuming.
Yeah.
But you own that presence.
No,
There was something
thanks.
about that I
Yeah.
thought, oh, this looks like something.
It was intentional. Like, I mean, we thought a
I
lot
was
of
reading
it.
about that
Yeah.
the lowercase letters are intentional, right?
Totally. I mean, it's a playwright. And again, there's so many different ways to tell a story in theater. So there's traditional text-based writing, like you write a story, that's playwriting, and that would be a text-based playwright. But you can put together something imagistically, where it would be just using the language of movement. There would be choreography. You can create in different languages. So there's lots of different ways to do it. But usually the creator, particularly traditionally a playwright, it's hard. If you're a writer, you tend to be in your room and kind of introverted, and it's hard to meet people, and then you have this beautiful idea and you have to find your people, and it's a really tough thing to do if you don't have an incubator or access for people to have that happen for you. So, and yet the whole notion of what we go to see a piece of theater, it starts with the idea of the person that created it, the playwright. So I always thought it was crazy that the person that started the whole ball rolling financially was probably in the worst position, right? And had the most difficulty finding those funding. So that was something that really was the fire in my belly going forward. So the small P, small d was intentional. It's very unassuming, but like, this dog bites, right? So, and why Pat the Dog is we wanted something that was fun and frivolous, and kind of people could think of the name, but it really had a deep meaning to it. So, there's 2 stories. I'll give you the real story. So the story we told everybody that was on the website back in the day was that it was
still there. I read it.
Still, but we have some truth in it now too. But it was literally, Mackenzie King had a dog named Pat, and what stories that dog would have heard, because we know that he would talk to his dog and have different ghosts, and it was a Waterloo region story. The real story is that we're having dinner with a bunch of playwright friends and a friend of Michael Verntiesen, who he came to Kitchener Waterloo years ago and had a piece called Einstein's Gift, the one the Governor General's Award, and I worked on the first dramaturgy of that with him, and we became friends. and he would use an expletive. I don't know if you can swear in here, but I won't. Okay, well, he said, the last fucking person invited to the table is a dog, is a playwright. A playwright's like a dog. It's like, pat the head here. You created the piece, now just go away. And I thought, okay, that's fantastic. Pat the dog. So it made sense on a couple of levels because it's a strong piece for advocacy. And our work, my particular work as a founder and still the artistic director of the company, is to carve out a strong space for creators to have their own space. Funding. I mean, what if you're a single mom? What if you're just mom, period, single, whatever, and you're trying to work, but, you can't get any money for childcare or elder care? Like, we don't have the conditions really set yet for artists. If you want to create art, you usually have to do it on your own nickel. What if you can't afford that
we're still in that
nickel?
time where it's seen as a bit of a luxury.
Yeah,
you're an artist. Well, it must be so
Are you a
easy.
fool? You can't do anything else.
Yeah.
You fool that you are.
And I know those women are out there because they blog about it, right?
Yeah.
Here I am, I'm a child care provider.
Yeah.
I used to be a playwright. I so badly want to do this again.
It's hard.
Please.
It's really hard.
I also think about your website touches on this, and I'm a big fan of The Simpsons.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you could picture putting a play of this kind in front of Homer and be like, oh, I don't get it. Right? And there's something
true.
very truthful about
It's
that.
absolutely true.
There's something very alienating about it for some people as well. It's like, oh, I don't like that. I don't think I'm going to like that.
Yeah, I think that, and so the onus, I do believe, and I've accepted the onus is on the artist to kind of broker those divides. Whether it's right or not, it's moot. You just got to do it. Again, that's underneath why we're doing a month-long festival, which is kind of crazy, but it's going to invite invitation at all levels. There'll be some really weird theater in there, but there'll also be some stuff that's pretty accessible. There'll be conversations that are easy and accessible. There'll be stuff for kids. I mean, it's a little mix of who we are as a community. I mean, classically, the definition of theater is all community. It used to be back in the Roman Greek days that if you wanted to, when you voted, you couldn't vote unless you'd seen a couple of pieces of theater to experience questions and to think about what's going on in your society.
Maybe that should still apply.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
I'm for it, I think, most people are good and most people have an empathetic heart, but we become so alienated from each other. The more I'm holding up my phone right now, but the more we touch these things and become close to these things, the less we're connected to each other. And I think that's why we need to gather. So that space, when we do come together to experience something, it's pretty wonderful and exciting. So, and again, theater isn't just like what we'd see at Stratford or Drayton or what we would think is traditional theater. We had a piece in our micro-performance space, Edna's, which is down in Kitchener, 2 weeks ago with a company that had won a major award with the Summerworks Festival, and it was a piece for only 4 people. And it was this glorious piece about foreign exchange, but it was supposedly about foreign exchange, but it was really about human heart and what we value. When you walked in to see this piece, this particular group of players, there were 3 of them, all young people, kind of in their late 20s. There was $1,000 on the table, all in 5s and 10s, a couple $100 bills. And as you would ask questions, you would do the exchange of the dollars. And at the end of the play, you were given the option to keep the money. And then they left. It was this really interesting piece about human condition, and you were with 4 people you didn't know.
Oh, that's actually really cool.
That's theater.
Yeah,
We did that. We did it in our office, and it was that horrible snowy weekend, and people came out for it. It was awesome.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I know. See, and this is the kind of stuff that's done all over the world, but we don't do enough of it in Kitchener-Waterloo. So
I'm amazed at what could be crafted for a space. I watched a little play on YouTube, and when I first saw it, I thought, that looks like the Button Factory.
Yeah.
So there must be many button factories across
There
Canada.
are, yeah.
And here it was wooden floors, same kind of window structure.
Yep.
And then all it was maybe a lava lamp to create some light, and then a table.
Yeah.
And it was riveting. And I loved how the audience, some people were sitting on the floor, some were standing.
Yeah.
But you could feel the warmth.
It's beautiful.
And so the Button Factory is not unique. Like there
Yeah.
must be many spaces that look like that and feel like that.
They are. Many of them are renovated spaces, and they're beautiful spaces. I mean, our office is located in a house that's 110 years old. And so there's a couple upstairs that are, a young couple upstairs, and then there's a young couple downstairs. And then there's 2 offices on the main floor, and one is our office, and the other side is really, it could be an office. It used to be a mortgage broker was there. And we've made that a micro-performance space where we do performances for 30 people or less.
And this is the Edna's?
That's the Edna
building?
space, yeah.
Is it named after our Edna Stabler, our local
it could
hero?
Be. It's actually named after an Edna that lived in Kitchener.
Oh,
and
really?
it was a woman that lived in Kitchener-Waterloo in the 20s and 30s that was born and raised, and she went to Sotheby School, which is our office is right beside Sotheby School, one of the oldest schools in the region. And she was an artist who was a dancer. She went during the Second World War. She traveled with went overseas to dance and everything else. And the reason why I'm aware of this woman is that she had an archive of all her photographs and letters and everything else. And it was found by my colleague Majdi Boumatar. And when Majdi got it, he gave it to me.
Oh, that's wonderful.
He said, "You're a woman. You should look at this."
So both you and your husband, Mark Walton, are
Yeah.
the keepers of these.
Of the Edna Archive, yeah.
The Edna Archive and
He's got Stan Rosenthal's.
Stan
yeah,
Rosenthal's
yeah.
work. Yeah.
It's daunting. It's very daunting. Because it's and I think probably that's why they give it to us, because we won't abuse it. But my God, it's what a privilege and an honor, but what a responsibility.
Yeah,
So
to preserve that local history. Too.
yeah, and I mean, and this was somebody like this woman left this whole box that had her whole history, like her baby book is in there, her bloody baby book, from the 20s, and it was left by a dumpster. Like, again, another story of a woman, a person that was just, it wasn't important, it was marginalized. And, if we don't have family that loves us and keeps that legacy, it could be any of us, right? So I we named the space after her, and the archive is there, and occasionally we'll do things with it, but it's something that's there for anyone that wants to come in and participate, and someone will create something from it, but it's just
Artist Michael Manson.
Yeah.
I once asked her why she didn't sign her artwork in the 60s until maybe around the 80s. There was no signature. She said, "Well, I was a woman artist. I didn't think it mattered."
Yeah, that's
and
true.
I'll never forget when I first heard that. I
Yeah.
thought, "What are you talking
Yeah.
about?" She said, at that time, I didn't think it really mattered.
It's really true, and I think it's difficult for all artists. I mean, first of all, if you choose to be an artist, you're marginalized anyhow.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm really I have a background in business, so but my real job that I got after school, after university, I was a stockbroker. So, I worked.
What haven't you done?
Yeah, there's a lot I haven't done. There's a lot I haven't.
Well,
done.
here's
Yeah,
the thing. When I
yeah.
first saw your home, I was invited to your home, and I thought, so these are two artists
Yeah.
living in this really beautiful home in this
thanks.
beautiful neighborhood
Yeah.
in Waterloo.
Yeah, we're bringing down the demographic, to trust me.
Yeah, it was like,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is the
yeah,
only couple I know where one of them doesn't have a really high-paying job. and
Neither of them have a
high-tech,
high-paying job. It's a previous life that's paying for this. It's my previous life I'm the only
Still.
person in the world with an inverse earning curve. So but again, isn't that a tragedy? So
Yeah.
if you think about that, if I hadn't had a job that paid well and had that support and could do that, I wouldn't have been able to invest the money and the time to build an organization that's now making those changes. But that shouldn't be. And so, like my statement, because I've gone to Parliament a number of times, I've called on the ministers, I've been involved in those initiatives, and my statement is, it ends here. Like, I'm double the age of most people I work with, and it can't be that way for them. We lose voices. I mean, traditionally in theater, we lose them at about age 27 to 30. So they'll come out of the programs, be it undergrad or masters. They'll be trained. They'll be really good at what they do, and it's just too hard because they'll come out of school and they're expected to be a barista or dog walker and then work part-time as their art. What other industry trains people and then invites them to go work as a barista? And I love myself a good cup of coffee, don't get me wrong, but that's not what the training is. So to my mind, and again, you have to be good at what you do, not all comers, but there should be the opportunities and the facility for those that are trained and do well to be able to get jobs, much like Communitech provides. And so that's been my argument, and not could we been successful. We there's a beautiful foundation called the Metcalf Foundation in Toronto, and they have something called a Performing Arts Internship. It's in Toronto, but they do sometimes fund outside. And we're the only organization in Waterloo to ever receive Metcalfs. We have two. This is our second one, and so Rebecca Ballerin, who's a gorgeous producer, young, she's only in her late 20s, but she was a regional creator from Peterborough, and she's worked all through Ontario. And we have enough funding for a full salary for a year in an internship with us because of Rebecca. So my feeling is, why can't we have more of those locally here? We've got two universities that are, Guelph, UW, Laurier, Conestoga College is vibrant, and they're building a beautiful theater program there for tech. We have 750,000 people here that we know of, probably more. Holy crap, man.
So how do you think it
talent.
is that people in that age group, you said 27 to 30
Yeah.
maybe, go from feeling unimportant
Yeah.
to, no, this is what I'm doing is relevant. And because a lot of messages tell us we're not.
Yeah.
And then there's messages that come your way, especially Lisa's,
Yeah.
that tell you this is important.
Yeah.
It has to be getting that opportunity, like what Pat the Dog does,
Absolutely.
right?
Well, myself and others. I mean, I'm not the only one, but I'm kind of, in our region, kind of that one. A number of reasons. One, if on the downside, the bad news is oftentimes we see too many people of privilege that can do that because they can be supported potentially by their family, which is wonderful if your family supports it. But I always say, how many people do we leave that maybe are marginalized or working class or, like normal people, right? So it's self-select out just because they can't. Because good stories come from anywhere, and if you want to capture the citizenry, which is what theater's supposed to do, you got to have all comers, man. You got to have all stories, right? So that's the one piece. The second piece is that even if you have the ability, you have to have that opportunity. So you have to have somebody who'll listen to you. You have to have hope. It's about confidence and hope. I think the biggest thing 15 years in, now going to 15th year, when we're successful, when I'm successful, is somebody leaves and they feel good about themselves and they feel there's hope. And I'm tough, man. Like, come to my door. If you haven't got the stuff, you get out the door. I've fired more people than I've hired. There are people that hate me because they won't progress. We're a professional organization. If I give someone a reading, they write a play, and I hire actors to read the play. That reading will cost me anywhere between $500 to $2,000. That's public money that I have to raise, and I take that responsibility really seriously. So if I'm going to take public money, which is my taxes, your taxes, everyone else's, it's got to be strong. But when it's strong, we'll do that reading. And then when it's ready, we'll go to workshop, which is we'll actually bring in a director, maybe a designer, pay everybody the rates to do that, and that can cost me anywhere from $1,500 to $10,000. So it's got to progress even more. And again, the work has to be there to make that happen. So the people that I work with that progress, they are amongst the hardest workers you're going to find. These are really, really, really good people who work hard at what they do. But they're given, oftentimes they don't feel that their work is important because it's been so hard for them to make that happen. So
what's the process? How do they come to you? Right?
A lot of referrals at this point. Back in the day, and I wish we could still do it, but unfortunately, because of literally, we just have too many people coming to us, I can't do intake anymore. So before, people would send scripts and I would read them, and people still do, but I don't have the ability anymore. In our women's room, we have a few women that at the Sears Women's Room that want me to read their script, but I'm about 9 months backed up on scripts. Again, the health and welfare of the arts worker. I work pretty much 24/7. That's not healthy. I'm not a young woman anymore. I got a life. I got a husband, as you know, because you've had him on the podcast. And you also have to rest your brain too. That being said, you still put in those hours. I mean, you guys, we're all working here in the evening, right? This is what we do, right? To do what we do. But mostly through referral, but in areas that we have a specific interest in, Kitchener, Waterloo, our region here, Southwestern Ontario for women, and Northern Ontario for anyone that's interested in telling a Northern Ontario story, and you're a Northern Ontarian.
Tell us more about that.
Oh, wow. So we got an investment from the Ontario Trillium Foundation in 2010. We were referred by Canada Council to the Trillium Foundation, the province-wide program. So what that means is that we were asked to put an application in. The board of directors of the Ontario Trillium Foundation gave us an opportunity for a grant, and we received a grant for $250,000, which was a huge thing. Again, we were the only arts organization in Waterloo region to ever get that for province-wide, and it allowed us to go up and just see if there was anything in Northern Ontario. Partially the money was for here, but also for Northern Ontario. And I had like 3-year outcomes going up there just to meet different people to tell stories. And in the first 6 months working in Sudbury, I met my 3-year outcomes in 6 months. The work was incredible. The people had amazing stories. They just needed to work with a dramaturg and have a little bit of money for their readings. And we had audience come, and it was just remarkable. Creating a table, inviting people to come, reading their work, doing all the things we do. That's the craft of what we do to make work. It's a great community up there. It's really interesting because 40% is Franco-Ontarian. So the idiom, the speaking in English and in French is really interesting. Huge Indigenous community as well. And then what we call the settler community, which is traditional white community. But an interesting group. It was Finnish, Ukrainian, Italian. These are all the people that worked in the mines. And so none of their stories have been told.
Right.
So I loved it because people were coming with these stories I'd never heard before that were deep in families. And about 2 years in, it was really clear that this was something special, so I launched a festival. Literally, we had 4 pieces that were ready to be read to audience. and I love food. So we hired a couple of musicians, and we had some food, and we created an evening over 4 nights. And I did some also professional development master classes so people could have professional development. And
I want to go. I'm not a playwright.
Come on up. April 26th. Come on up in Sudbury. And it was phenomenal. We had an amazing time, and that was 8 years ago. And now it's a major thing. We've been asked by Canadian Heritage to do a conference on touring in Northern Ontario. We have folks coming from all across the country. We have folks coming from Scotland this year. It's a bit of a thing. So it's that energy that I'm putting in the new festival here in Kitchener-Waterloo. Because I was really affected by that study in 2015 that said we were the worst place for women to live and work in Canada. And I really...
Well, I'm going to change that.
Yeah.
That's what you thought. Yeah.
Well, honestly, what I did is I kicked my butt because I thought, I live here. My kids were raised here. I'm going to be buried in this community. I've lived here for 30 years. What am I doing to make a difference? And I'm working in North Ontario, which I'll continue to do, and I do a lot of work in Toronto. But what am I doing to change my own community, which is why we did the Women's Room. And I thought, okay, O'Connell, we don't have enough women's stories out there. Maybe this will make a difference. And it has. So now, into the 5th year now where we're launching this festival. And it's simply that I really believe if people see their stories, it'll affect them. The things we know about each other, that you'll have more empathy about what's going on in the world. You'll have, the main piece we're presenting is a full production of a new play by a beautiful playwright we've worked with in Northern Ontario called Kristen Shepherd, and it's called Hope Op, and it's this beautiful, very lovely, light comedy about yoga, crime, and women's anger. And it's just this piece about 4 middle-aged women who've really had enough, and it's a very light, accessible, easy, beautiful piece that's funny as hell, but it's about how women deal with anger in a way that's kind of funny and crazy.
I love it.
So these are, in one sense, they're kind of like regional stories, but they'll resonate with anybody.
Yeah. Well, you're starting where regional is, it's anything. It's a Jane Jacobs, right? Regional is local, is international, is all of us, right? I mean, I've done some travel internationally, been asked to do consulting and go to different countries and talk about the work we do. And people are really interested in us. And they're interested in who we are and what we are. They're interested in Kitchener-Waterloo.
You have a story to tell, and that is the
so
entire.
do you.
Yeah, and that's the entire thing that brings a community together, and that allows you to share your community with somebody else. Like you're talking about working in Northern Ontario with all of these different types of people.
Yeah, beautiful people.
And those stories could die if they weren't passed on and told.
That's the thing,
right?
And we pass them on. It's like the oral tradition. I mean, what do we do when we're together? What do we do when you're having a really good group of people together with pizza, glass of wine, or whatever you have is right? You tell those stories. We still want to touch each other. We still want to be together. We still want to see each other. We still want to have those moments. And these are the things that resonate with that.
And that's like the life cycle of a story too. A story on your phone, on your Twitter, on your Instagram, on your Facebook, it has a life cycle of something like 30 seconds, right? People don't even get into the actual story. Yeah. Same thing with your Netflix and your Amazon Prime and all those types of things that you're watching. You are not there hearing the hush and the cough and the candy wrapper and all, feeling the lights and feeling the mood when actors come out. That kind of storytelling, that tangible kind of storytelling, I think is what lasts with us. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you the reason why I do it. So the reason why I do it is my moment and the things that I live for, and you only get it once in a while. But if it's right, if a piece of theater is really cracking, if it's really right, if you're really there, you can be in an audience of like 500 people, like 1,000 people, even more. And at some point, everyone is so riveted at what's going on that you're all breathing at the same time. And that sense of that collective feeling that we are all together joined in something that we share with strangers we don't even know, that is so bloody beautiful. To me, that is the most hopeful expression of who we are. And it gets me through a lot of the crap that's going on in the world right now. It's like, okay, things are bad. And again, theater has to express those different things too, right? The brutally beautiful is part of what we are. We have to talk about those things and see those things and express those things. But it's all towards a more empathetic heart, a more empathetic understanding, and a sense of who and what we are, And it has to be entertaining too, right? I mean, you have to have something in there that you walk away with. I love theater that you think about the next day. And you can think about it just because it's fun and makes you laugh, or you can think about it because there's something that was disturbing you can't forget. That to me is much more engaging. And I mean, I'm a consumer of all the stuff, right? So I binge, I watch all that stuff, but there's something about when it's live that's just really beautiful. And I think people miss that. I think people want to come together. And again, like I say, any reason to have some food too.
Do you ever think about stories that aren't reachable? I met a woman a while back who was, she's doing her master's degree in
Yeah.
something. And I said, what are you doing your master's in? She goes, crime in old Order Mennonite communities.
Wow.
And there was a long pause, and I said,
So specific.
I said, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Like, what crime? And she goes, well, there's lots of crime.
Yeah.
I said, there is? And she goes, yeah. And I thought, oh my gosh, how naive of me to think that.
Of course.
Yeah, and how there's incredible stories in that community that maybe we'll never hear. Or maybe sometimes those stories can be interpreted from outside sources very carefully.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the assumption we all make in each other, right? So it's natural you'd feel that way. We'd all feel that way. So if we don't know the truth of who and what we are, and we don't investigate and have that brought to us, then we'll make assumptions predicated on cliche, and that's how we get bad government, bad neighbors. You know,
Yeah.
we make decisions and judgments based on no knowledge of really who we are and what we are. Yeah, and so the courage of somebody in a community that would want to investigate and tell those stories, and then assisted by maybe people that can help them if they don't know how to do it in a either theatrical concept or book or conference or whatever. Yeah, there's it's like anything. Stories, like I always say, it's like the onion, right? You just peel it back, and the more you see those different pieces.
Yeah.
And it's just super, super interesting. And I mean, I find that fascinating. I find the human condition absolutely fascinating. I mean, as I said, I worked in business, and I love business. I was really good at it back when that was, the first thing that I did. But to a certain extent, it's boring. You either make the money, or you don't make the money. But you can't ever get human condition right. Like, there's something incredibly interesting about who and what we are. I mean, it can be horrible. It can break your heart, but that's not necessarily a bad thing either, because the resilience of how you get past that is pretty cool, and it's fun. So, and I'm so endlessly curious about, like, our community. I've been here 30 years, but there's so much I don't know, still. And
So do playwrights work like this? I think about, so there was a train disaster in Waterloo in 1901.
Yeah.
And there's very little information out there about it. It's
Right.
very minimal, just the way newspapers were written up at the time.
Yeah.
But I've heard that there are storytellers out there who take that and they can kind of fill in the gaps.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's also okay to have lots of gaps.
Yeah, for sure.
And maybe it's they draw from the countryside and what they knew about what that area looked like back then.
Yeah.
And how people were. And is that what playwrights do with historical pieces? Is there's a certain freedom and they can take to
Sure.
tell that story, even if maybe there aren't historical accuracies?
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it depends on the story you're telling. So if you're telling, if you're doing something that's documentary, and there's something called verbatim theater, which literally you take the words, you don't shift them, and documentary, where you might want to stick more to what the truth of it is, more factual, more journalistic. There's always, even when it's journalism, there, you have an edge or an idea of where you want to go. So there's that. But yeah, I mean, you can take an idea of something that happened and just create a story around it. That's where myth comes from. So that's fantastic. It totally would depend on the inspiration and what excites the writer. I always say, what excites you? What are you excited about working on? And if you're excited about something, that's what you should work on. And I believe a storyteller, playwright, has, if they want to just run with it, they have the ability to do so. So yeah, the big mythic stuff is super cool.
So
right?
myths can be new?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's I mean, a lot of news stories that are out there. They all many of them are based on traditional tropes or things we've seen, but they play on different ideas and notions. And
This is the writer's mind for sure. So
Yeah.
I'm not a writer. Marshall can attest because of the emails that I sent him. They're not great. I'm going to tell you, they're not great. I
Don't say
usually
that.
get my thought across, but
That's
I
everything.
thought one of the most exciting places in the world must be like the SNL writers' room or the Seth Meyers Late Show writers'
Sure.
room. Like the things that they must come up with that don't come
Yeah.
out, you know?
But it's any room. You're doing it right now.
Yeah.
This is what it is. This is all it is, right? And I mean, it just becomes a hyper deadline, right? Because they have to get something churned out in a week, and
Or
and
like
there's
the
pressure.
Daily Show
Yeah.
in Trevor Noah. That's
Yeah, for
every
sure.
single day.
Yeah. It's
5
just-
p.m. they're writing, right?
Yeah, it's a deadline. It's go forward. So it's all the same process, and it's all about risk. And if you watch enough SNL, there'll be nights it really cooks, and there's nights it's just awful because you take the risk, right? But that's all this is. That's that kind of thing getting together. Anybody can do. I mean, it truly, truly is. And some people are better than others at it, but we all have that instinct and inspiration of happen. And there's ways to kind of try to make it stronger when you have that impulse. And that's all it is, right?
Do you sometimes see a performance for the first time that you thought would work really well, and it just doesn't, and you're left with more questions than answers. You don't know why it didn't work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, and again, that's the geek in me, right? Because I'm a dramaturg, so I'm the person in the room that would throw those questions forward. So what really pisses me off is when work is presented too early to audience. It isn't cooked properly. It's done either too quickly, or maybe they didn't do the rigor they should do, So when you have something that could be really beautiful and it fails because maybe they just didn't do the proper work for it. And oftentimes the proper work isn't done because maybe they ran out of money or time. So there's always reason for that as well. I love it when someone takes a risk and says, okay, I've only got X number of dollars and so much time, and I want to explore this, and I'm just going to put it out there. But then they ask those questions, and then they go back and follow up. That's super cool.
What about improvisational dance? Is that part of what you do?
Sure, everything is. I mean, yeah.
Is it looked at? You know how some people see visual art as abstract art is easier than representational art.
Sure.
I think about maybe theater where there's no dialogue but dance.
Yeah.
As difficult as dance is, do some people see it in some way that like less than?
No, I don't. I think so. I think if it's done well. I mean, again, you're working with image, right? So if you lead an audience towards an image or a feeling or an experience, it can be really beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, again, arguably, maybe not for everybody, depending on what you're doing. But I think if something is done well, you can almost always lead someone to feel something. You've got to go through what that needs to be. But a beautiful image is a beautiful image, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I mean, and it just depends on what type of theater it can be as well. I think I'm a big stickler for people being casual in the theater. So I think one of the reasons why we've got such barriers to people going to theater is that we still have a very colonial way of looking at it. You have to sit down, you have to wear good clothes, you can't speak. And, theater back in the day is you get up as you wanted to, you get up and you leave. And when you see theater in Europe, I mean, I saw Aida in an amphitheater in Verona. I know that sounds very la-di-da, but it was like the only time in my life I ever saw this. But it was literally this amphitheater and this big, beautiful bloody opera, and literally the elephants and everything else was absolutely glorious. And it was families, and I'm at the very top, sitting on a stone that was like 2,000 years. My bum was indented with somebody from 2,000 years ago. It was crazy. And everybody was bringing food, and there were kids where they were changing the diapers, and there were old people sleeping, and people got up and they went, and they were wearing shorts, and it was fantastic because it was, you came to experience something with community, you were enjoying it, you took as much as you could or left, and you could get up and go as you please. And I think
why this dead funeral silence when we go to theater now?
I mean,
instantly, dance.
It's like anything. I mean, do you want to go to somebody's house for dinner if you have to sit and be, like we were talking about this a little bit earlier about being really fascistic about having to do certain things? You do that, you get people's ire up, and we've, that's one of the reasons in Canadian theatre now more and more, all theatre, but really what we're seeing in Canadian theatres, we're seeing what we call more immersive theatre, which is really allowing people to play in a different way. Like this piece, we had like a piece about foreign exchange we had last week in our Edna space, which was for four people. It was very relaxed. It was very, it was just it was focused. You were directed. They were definitely in control, but you felt the freedom to come and go as you wanted to. But because it was so interesting, you didn't want to leave. So that's very successful.
I find that interesting because I find with a lot of musicians, I remember Matt Osborne from this community.
I do too.
One of the things, Matt was on a local TV show before he passed away, and he said, my hope is, I think it was called The Woodlands. He wanted this kind of concert setup where for once everybody was sitting and looking at the stage and listening. And there weren't the clanging of glasses and chicken wings and people talking. And his hope was that there would be a venue in town where people would sit and listen to songwriters like Matt Osborne. And I completely related to that. So this is really interesting to hear you say that it's not only okay to not have that environment for
it's
theater,
preferred.
But it's preferred.
It's what it's demanded, and I think more and more that's the space we'll carve out. We just have old structures and old practices, and where we that's why it's kind of why I do what I do. So like last weekend, and it was, I have to give great love to Sam and the folks at Registry Theatre. It was the piece they were doing, but in great generosity, they had it in our space, so that our space had a smaller venue that would work for them, and we worked really well together. Technically, I wasn't working this weekend, but Sam's got young kids, so I did front of house. So basically what I'm the artistic director, but I'm sitting there letting people in, taking their tickets, because we're all helping each other out, right? And also had an opportunity to really talk to people as they came out and see what their experience was. And it was great, because it was something that we don't get here very often, but has been around for 30, 40 years pretty actively in New York or Toronto or different places. And we just need to push that more and introduce audience to it. It's going to feel weird the first time you go because it's something you're not used to. And there's some people that will never be comfortable with it, and that's okay. But there are others that will be. And it doesn't matter what age you are. The assumption is if you're my age, you won't like that stuff. Well, that's not true. I like it. I always did. And I have lots of friends that would like it too. And so, we make way too many bloody assumptions about who we are and what we are here. And I really believe 30 years into this community that I truly at some point will be buried in. Yeah. We don't know who we are. We really don't.
Oh gosh, no,
yeah.
I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah, but it's not a gorgeous, beautiful thing, right? That's why I was so thrilled to hear. Like, this is like props like crazy to you guys for doing this podcast. This is so fantastic.
We talk quite often about how we've learned a lot about ourselves through this project, especially hearing your own voice. That's always an interesting thing.
Well, I was saying to them earlier, I'm going to go into the Sweaty Ball String Fest now. I feel myself going, love those sweaty balls. Yeah, I just,
That's a nice.
I learned in this conversation how rigid I am. Like for me, the registry theater, I like black and minimal. There's nothing to look at but the performance. I want the light on them. I want everybody else to be quiet.
But
if you have to cough, go outside.
But that's okay. Like,
it lends to that. The space does.
Yeah. And that's totally okay. I mean, that's the thing. There's all sorts of different ways of doing it. And there's points that I want that extreme focus too, for sure. But it's like anything. You want to, it's like again, I love to eat. So, you want to have all sorts of different foods. You want a little of this, a little of that, you want to try different flavors. You want to feel different experiences. And when theater really works best, when you have enough of it in a community, and this community deserves more, it really does, we live here, you get a little bit of all these things, and you won't necessarily like it all. You're not supposed to. It's like we don't like everything we read or see. You're not supposed to, but we should have more opportunity. There should be more things brought to us. We should have the opportunity to see it and talk about it. And
I love that you're making that point.
Oh yeah, and you've got to take the risk of it as well. Like it's not about it being perfect. It's about it just having that situation. And then the best part is that afterwards, you gather afterwards for a drink or a coffee or whatever you want, and talk about why it worked and why didn't it work for you. Yeah. And if it didn't work for you, that is valid as if it did. But we don't allow ourselves those conversations.
Yeah, it's either I hate it and I don't want to talk about it, or I loved it and here's why.
I just really hated it. And and that's great because
why did you feel that way?
Exactly. And but then we have a conversation more about what is and what isn't right. And so we need those challenging pieces. For someone who doesn't see dance ever, to see an improvisational movement piece, which would be like, what the hell was that? And somebody who maybe wants something more abstract to see maybe a traditional piece of like a 3-act comedy, right? What is in those forms, and what do they bring forward to us as well?
Are you attracted to the idea that these plays, a lot of them exist just in this moment for this one night maybe, and then they're gone? There's no recording of it. There's no documentation. Yeah. Like you said, you go out afterwards for drinks, and that's it. It all just lives on in your memory. Yeah, I like the liveness of it. I mean, that's what's really great about it. You can have a template, but every night it changes. Yeah. And yeah, I love that, because then it's like every moment's special. Like our moment right now is special, right? It'll never come back, but it'll be here in our memory. It's in our bodies in some way. Yeah. It's just super cool. And if if you're lucky enough to realize how privileged we are that we're actually breathing right now, and I don't think you have to be a certain age to feel that way. I think there's really smart, intelligent, empathetic folk that know that young. You value that. Yeah. That's really super cool and lovely. Yeah. And doesn't mean they're always great moments, right? But there's something in that that's really wonderful. And that's what's magic, because then it's the sense of value in that moment. Like, oh wow, I only get this. And then, when things screw up, right? That's when something goes wrong. You feel that moment that happens, I hate it when it's canned and it's the same thing. I don't like it when actors do the same thing and a piece gets canned and easy, because it's just not interesting to watch or experience. And good actors, they want to play with that every night. They want to see how that moves. And a good playwright will create moments in that play to allow that expression to come forward. Theater is a collaboration. It has to be the artistic points that come together, that collaborate to experience and show something for you. Yeah.
I've heard seasoned actors speak about that before, like, super famous people,
sure,
about how, they've done the blockbuster movies, they've won the Academy Awards and all that kind of stuff, and they go back to theater to scare themselves and to remember how to do it, right? Yeah. And I think that must be a big part of it, just that it's not canned, it's not predictable, and they're throwing themselves into this scary mix all over again, right?
It's hard. I mean, you're also there's just a lot of different skill sets you have to have. I mean, I'm not an actor. As I said, I'm a single threat. I'm a terrible actor. I'm a great dramaturg, but I'm a terrible actor. But yeah, it's a whole different thing, and you push yourself forward for that as well, and it's quite beautiful. And then when it's done, you're like, yes, it's like running a race, I think. you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think.
I think. Not an actor. For me, you know, I'm the person in the back. I always sit in the very back and I'm like, you know, sweating, right? Just, you know, always. It's a different kind of energy. You're there and you're part of it, but you're in a different place. So, yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the festival.
Oh, sure. Thank
right?
you. Yeah.
So the festival's in March, the Women's
It is.
Festival.
So
Tell us where people can find information,
Sure.
what's going to be going on more.
So the festival is called Femme Folks Fest. We're purposely calling it Femme because it's for women identified and presenting, and not all folk identify as female. So it invites the non-binary folk in our community to come together. I hate to say it's not men. Really, in many ways, that's the moniker. But we have many men working the festival, and male allies is working with it as well. But again, it's predominantly to focus women's work because it doesn't get produced enough. It runs March 7th to March 30th. Right across the region, particularly Kitchener-Waterloo. So we'll be at KWLT in Waterloo. We're at the train station in Uptown Waterloo in front of Perimeter Institute for the entire month of March. We're at the Church of the Good Shepherd in Kitchener. We're at our Edna Performance Space, and we're also at the Registry Theatre. Information can be seen on the website, which is femmefolksfest.ca. There'll be lots of stuff out as well. We've got a ton of social media. You know, hopefully you won't be able to miss us for the month of March. We're launching everything in the second week in February. But by now, you'll probably already know of it. What else can I tell you? And it's full performances, pieces in incubation, which are process-based pieces, conversations with community, panels on different issues that affect women, just a whole lot of work. Installations, there are a lot of free events, a lot of events. March break will be at the train station Uptown Waterloo with free programming for children. Just a whole lot of stuff, and then some ticketed events as well.
That's great. I was reading something the other day about, I'm just looking at it here, grade 11 students in Ottawa ditching Shakespeare and studying Canadian authors and
Super cool.
Indigenous authors. So you've heard this also.
Absolutely.
I wanted to hear your thoughts about it.
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, it has to be relevant information. So you don't completely deny history, but a lot of history of many peoples in our country, in all countries, has not been recorded. So we haven't recorded women's history as much. We certainly haven't covered Indigenous history. So I think it's fantastic. We have beautiful authors that have created this work. These stories are relevant to community. They need to be told. I mean, I never studied any. I am Indigenous, but didn't know till I was 14, and I had no access to any of those stories at all. And my kids, even they're in their late mid-20s now, but they didn't study. They all went to school in this community. It really wasn't studied as well. So we need more of those stories, the opportunity for those stories to be there. You don't throw out everything from the past either. You look at that, but it's not either or. It's a sense of kind of catching up and having those different pieces as well. We don't have enough women's work that's studied. We don't even know that. I mean, the New York Times went back and did those obits, right? For women that had done amazing things, but the obits were never written because they weren't considered to be significant, right? So it's playing catch up in many ways. But I like to think of it as just more and better stuff, right?
Yeah.
For everybody. It doesn't mean we don't want male stories as well. We want it's not either or, but we need to just provide that opportunity, and I mean, we all have room for that. You always have one more to party, right? So
Yeah, exactly. Especially if there's food.
Yeah, like I said, love to eat.
Thank you so much for coming. We really enjoyed having you.
It's lovely to be here.
Thanks,
you.
Lisa.
Pleasure.
It's a nice sweater vest you're wearing today.
Thank you so much. Love my
Yeah.
sweaty balls. Yeah.
Have you ever seen this sketch?
Yeah, I totally know it. Sorry,
We're butchering it. We're butchering it, but
It's a great sketch because it's these two women in the sweater vest and the whole stuff.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful.
And where can people find you online?
Again, right now you can find us at patthedog.org is the best way to find all of us for the organization. And then the festival, again, femmefolksfest.ca.
This was a lot of fun.
This was
Oh, so good.
Hey all, thanks for meeting us in Bonn Park. Please like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on the platform that you're listening to. And follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bonn Park Podcast. Original music by Alan Lung.